The emergency room doors burst open at 2:17 in the morning. Rain hammered against the windows of Mercy General Hospital as paramedics wheeled in a gurney carrying a man whose tactical gear was soaked in blood. His face was pale beneath mud and streaks of crimson, his breathing shallow and labored. Nurse Rachel Morgan looked up from the charts she had been organizing at the station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her blue scrubs were fresh despite being 6 hours into a shift. She moved toward the trauma bay with practiced efficiency, her footsteps quick but controlled across the polished floor. The lead paramedic shouted over the chaos as they transferred the patient. Male, late 20s, multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. Blood pressure is dropping. Heart rate is 140. We have been trying to stabilize him for 20 minutes, but he is coding. Dr. Marcus Chin appeared from the staff lounge, his white coat billowing behind him as he rushed forward. Chin was the chief of surgery, 48 years old with silver streaks in his black hair and a reputation for brilliance matched only by his arrogance. He had performed more trauma surgeries than anyone else in the state, and he made sure everyone knew it. "What do we have?" Chin barked as he pulled on gloves. "Gunshot wounds," the paramedic repeated. "Training accident at the military base outside town. He is a Navy SEAL. They were running live fire exercises when something went wrong." Rachel stepped closer to assess the patient, her trained eyes scanning the wounds with a precision that came from years of experience in places most nurses never worked. She could see the entry points, the pattern of bleeding, the way his chest moved with each struggled breath. Something in her mind clicked into place, a recognition born from muscle memory and hard-won knowledge. "Dr. Chin," she kept her voice steady and professional. "The bullet trajectory suggests a pneumothorax on the right side. We need to decompress immediately or he will arrest." Chin did not look at her. His attention was focused on cutting away the tactical vest and blood-soaked clothing. "I can see what I'm dealing with, Nurse Morgan. Get the blood warmer ready and let me do my job." "But the bleeding pattern indicates," Rachel started to say. "I said I have got this," Chin snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "You are a nurse, not a trauma surgeon. Stay in your lane." Rachel stepped back, her jaw tight. She had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting in the moment. Hospital hierarchy was as rigid as any military chain of command. Doctors gave orders, nurses followed them, even when those orders were wrong. The trauma team swarmed around the patient. A resident named Dr. Lisa Park moved to Chin's lift, her hands quick and competent as she helped expose the wounds. 2 more nurses arrived, their movements synchronized from countless hours working together. Monitors beeped frantically, displaying numbers that screamed danger to anyone trained to read them. "Blood pressure is 70/40, one nurse called out. "Oxygen saturation is dropping, 82%, another added. "Push 2 units of O negative, Chin ordered, "and get me a portable ultrasound. I need to see what we're dealing with internally." Rachel moved to prepare the blood transfusion, but her eyes never left the patient. She could see what Chin was missing, the subtle signs that years of combat medicine had taught her to recognize instantly. The way his trachea was deviating to the left, the distended neck veins, the paradoxical chest movement that indicated trapped air building pressure in the pleural space. She had seen this exact presentation dozens of times in field hospitals in Afghanistan, in forward operating bases where the nearest surgeon was a helicopter ride away through hostile territory, in situations where hesitation meant death and protocol took a back seat to survival. "Dr. Chin," she tried again, her voice carrying more urgency. "He needs a needle decompression right now. The tension pneumothorax is going to cause cardiac arrest if we do not relieve the pressure." "Nurse Morgan," Chin did not even glance up. "I appreciate your concern, but I am the one with 15 years of trauma surgery experience, not you. Now either help or get out of my way. The monitor screamed louder. The patient's body convulsed, his back arching against the restraints as his cardiovascular system began to fail. The line on the cardiac monitor spiked erratically, then started to flatten. "He's coding!" Dr. Park shouted, her voice cracking with sudden fear. Chen froze, his hands hovering over the patient's chest. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face, the kind of hesitation that came when textbook knowledge collided with a situation spiraling beyond control faster than training could account for. Rachel did not wait for permission this time. She stepped forward, grabbed a large bore needle from the crash cart, and moved to the patient's side. Her hands were steady, her movements precise. She located the second intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line, the exact spot where trapped air was compressing the lung and heart. "Nurse Morgan," Chen's face flushed red, "step back right now." Rachel ignored him. She inserted the needle with a swift, confident motion. There was a hissing sound as pressurized air escaped from the pleural space. Immediate decompression. The patient's chest wall relaxed. His breathing eased. The monitors began to stabilize. "Blood pressure climbing, 90/50, the monitoring nurse called out, her voice filled with relief. "Oxygen saturation improving, 88, 90, 92. Heart rate stabilizing, 120 and dropping." The trauma bay fell into stunned silence. Everyone stared at Rachel, at the needle she had just placed with the kind of precision that spoke of countless repetitions, at the patient who was now breathing more easily, his color improving from gray to pink. Chen stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, pride and fury warring in his expression. His entire trauma team had just watched a nurse do what he had failed to do, make the call that saved a life when he had hesitated. "How did—" Rachel began, but she did not get to finish. The patient's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused and clouded with pain and sedation, but there was something in them, a spark of recognition that should have been impossible. His lips moved, forming words that barely carried sound. "Shadow," he whispered. Rachel's hand tightened on the needle, her composure slipping for just a fraction of a second. That name. No one here should know that name. No one in this hospital. No one in this entire state. The patient's eyes found Dr. Chen. Despite the morphine coursing through his system, despite the trauma his body had endured, despite every reason he should be unconscious, he managed to speak clearly enough for the entire room to hear. "You have no idea who she is." Then his eyes closed, the sedation finally pulling him under. The trauma team moved quickly, preparing him for emergency surgery. But the words hung in the air like smoke, a question that demanded answers no one could give. Chen turned slowly to face Rachel. His expression was a mixture, confusion and anger, and something that might have been respect buried deep beneath wounded pride. "My office, after we stabilize him. We're going to have a very long conversation about what just happened here." Rachel said nothing. She simply cleaned up the supplies she had used, her hands moving with the same efficiency they always did, as if she had not just violated every protocol in the book, as if a patient had not just called her by a name that belonged to a different life, a life she had spent 3 years trying to leave behind. Around her, the trauma bay returned to its organized chaos, but she could feel the weight of stares, the whispered conversations that would spread through the hospital like wildfire, the questions that would multiply with each retelling. Who was Rachel Morgan really? How did a nurse know combat trauma techniques that most surgeons never learned? Why had that Navy SEAL recognized her? And what did he mean when he said no one knew who she was? Rachel finished her tasks, then walked toward the staff locker room, her mind already calculating exits and contingencies. She knew this moment would come eventually. You couldn't hide forever, not when the past had the habit of showing up bleeding and broken on a gurney, whispering names you thought were buried along with everything else. She looked at her reflection in the locker room mirror, dark circles under her eyes from too many double shifts, a face that had aged more than 3 years should account for. The same face she had been training herself to see as Rachel Morgan, small-town nurse, unremarkable and forgettable. But that patient had seen through it, had recognized Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake, Special Operations Medical Officer, the woman who had trained Navy SEALs in combat trauma care, who had operated in conditions that would break most surgeons, who had walked away from everything after one mission went so wrong that the truth had to be buried along with the bodies. Rachel splashed cold water on her face, straightened her scrubs, and walked back into the hallway.
"I was in the military," she said finally. "I worked trauma. That is where I learned those skills. When I left, I wanted to start over, work civilian medicine without questions about my service." "What did you do in the military?" "I was a medical officer, Special Operations Command. I trained combat medics, deployed with SEAL teams, provided trauma care in forward locations." Chen's expression shifted, anger giving way to confusion. "If you were a military doctor, why are you working as a nurse now? Why not continue practicing medicine? Why hide your background?" "Because some things are better left in the past." Rachel's voice hardened. "I left for reasons that are not up for discussion. I got my nursing credentials because it let me keep helping people without the complications of my previous work. And I would appreciate it if you kept this information to yourself." "You saved that man's life tonight," Chen said quietly. "When I froze, when I missed what was happening, you saw it immediately and acted. That kind of skill does not come from nursing school. It comes from experience, repeated exposure to trauma under pressure." He sat back down, his posture less aggressive now, more contemplative. "I am not going to report you for performing a procedure outside your scope of practice because you were right, and because that SEAL would be dead if you had not acted. But this hospital deserves to know who they have working here. Your skills could be valuable in training our trauma team." "No." The word came out sharper than Rachel intended. "I appreciate the thought, but I am here to work quietly, not to draw attention or train anyone. I did what I had to do tonight, that is all." "Why are you so determined to hide?" "Because the last time I did not hide, people died, and I nearly joined them." The words hung in the air, too honest, too revealing. Rachel stood abruptly. "If there is nothing else, I have patients to check on." Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Go." "But Rachel, or should I say Lieutenant Commander Blake?" Rachel froze at the door. "I looked you up while you were in surgery, made a few calls to people I still know in naval medicine. Your service record is mostly classified, but what little I could find suggests you were not just any medical officer. You were among the best, highly decorated, trusted with the most sensitive missions." His voice softened. "Whatever happened that made you leave, whatever you are running from, I hope you find peace with it eventually." Rachel left without responding. Her mind was racing. Chen knew her real name now, had accessed parts of her service record. The carefully constructed walls were collapsing faster than she had feared possible. She made her way back to the emergency department. The shift was winding down. Dawn was beginning to lighten the sky outside. In a few hours, the day shift would arrive. Life would continue its normal rhythm. But everything had changed. The SEAL was out of surgery, stable, moved to intensive care for monitoring. Rachel checked the surgical notes. Chen had repaired a lacerated liver, removed 2 bullets, patched damage to the small intestine. The operation had been flawless. Whatever pride had been wounded in the trauma bay, Chen's surgical skill remained intact. She walked to the ICU, her access badge granting entry to the secure unit. The nurse on duty looked up from her charts. "You here to check on the SEAL?" Just want to see how he's doing. Stable vitals, sedated but responsive. Chen says he should make a full recovery. The nurse hesitated. He was asking for someone when he came out of anesthesia. Kept saying a name. Shadow. Any idea who that might be? No idea, Rachel lied smoothly. Probably confusion from the anesthesia. She approached the patient's bedside. He was young, maybe 27, with the lean, hardened build of someone who had pushed their body to extreme limits. His face was peaceful now, the pain managed by medication. Monitors beeped steadily, showing healthy numbers. Rachel checked his chart. Sergeant Kyle Patterson, Navy SEAL Team 3, injured during training exercises. No next of kin listed, which probably meant his family was classified for security reasons. She was about to leave when his eyes opened, still clouded with drugs, but more focused than they had been in the trauma bay. Lieutenant Blake, his voice was rough, damaged by the breathing tube they had removed after surgery. I thought that was you, but I could not believe it. You disappeared 3 years ago. Everyone said you were dead, or in witness protection, or had gone completely off-grid. Rachel glanced toward the door, making sure no one was within earshot, then leaned closer. You need to keep your voice down and stop using that name. I am Rachel Morgan now, just a nurse, no connection to the military. Doesn't work that way, Kyle managed a weak smile. SEAL community is small. Word gets around when someone from the training cadre vanishes without explanation, especially someone like you. Lieutenant Commander Blake trained half the special operations medics in the field right now. Your techniques saved my life twice in Syria, once after an IED, once during an extraction under fire. A lot of guys owe you. That person does not exist anymore, Rachel's voice was firm. I left for good reasons, reasons that are still classified, and I need you to respect that I am trying to build a different life here. Kyle studied her face, something shifting in his expression. The mission? Kabul? 2021? That's why you left? It was not a question. Rachel felt ice run down her spine. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Kyle's eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. The operation that went wrong, the one where the intelligence was bad, where SEALs walked into an ambush, where people died who shouldn't have. His voice dropped to a barely whisper. You tried to report what really happened, and they buried you for it. Rachel stepped back, her heart pounding. How do you know about that? Because I was there, Kyle said quietly, not on the mission itself, but in the aftermath. I saw the bodies, heard the official story that did not match what we found on the ground. And when you disappeared right after the investigation closed, we knew. We knew they made you the problem, instead of fixing the actual problem. The ICU suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Rachel glanced at the monitors, making sure Kyle's increased agitation was not affecting his vitals dangerously. You need to rest. We can talk about this later. There's someone you should meet. Kyle ignored her attempt to end the conversation. Another guy from that mission. He's been trying to find you for 2 years. Has evidence that could reopen the investigation. But he needs your testimony, your first-hand account of what happened. No, Rachel's response was immediate. I tried that already. It destroyed my career and nearly got me killed. I'm not going through it again. Lieutenant, you were right the first time. The people responsible for that disaster are still in command, still making decisions that get soldiers killed. And as long as the truth stays buried, they'll never face consequences. His hand moved weakly toward hers. Please, just meet with him. Hear what he has found. Then decide. Rachel pulled her hand away. I'll think about it, but right now you need to focus on recovery, and you need to forget you ever recognized me, for both our sakes. She left before he could respond, walking quickly through the ICU, down the hallway toward the exit doors. Dawn had fully broken now, light streaming through windows, washing away the darkness that had covered her actions. But some darkness could not be washed away.
Some truths refused to stay buried, no matter how deep you tried to hide them. Rachel pushed through the exit doors into cool morning air that tasted of rain and exhaust and city life. Her car was in the employee lot, a plain sedan, unremarkable, exactly like everything else she had chosen for her new life. She sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it tightly. 3 years. She had managed 3 years of anonymity, 3 years of quiet nursing work, 3 years of trying to forget what she had seen in Kabul. The ambush that had killed 8 SEALs and a CIA operative, the intelligence failure that had sent them into a trap, and the subsequent investigation that had found no wrongdoing, no errors, no one to blame except the enemy who had set the trap. And Rachel, who had written a report detailing what she had witnessed, who had testified about the discrepancies between official intelligence and ground truth, who had questioned why experienced operators had been sent into a situation that felt wrong from the beginning. They called her unreliable, suffering from trauma, unable to accurately assess complex operational decisions. Her testimony was deemed emotional rather than factual, her recommendations ignored. And when she pushed harder, when she went outside the chain of command to try to get someone to listen, she was quietly pressured to resign. Not officially, never officially, but through a series of reassignments, dead-end posts, evaluations that questioned her judgment. Until the message became clear: leave on your own or be forced out with a career-ending mark on your record. So she had left, gotten her nursing credentials under her legal name, Sarah Blake, then created a new identity.
Pike Place Market hummed with afternoon crowds when Rachel arrived. Tourists photographed flying fish. Vendors called out prices for fresh flowers and produce. The smell of coffee and salt water mixed in the air. Captain James Rivera stood near the brass pig statue. Tall, early 40s, wearing civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing. His eyes scanned the crowd with practiced awareness until they found Rachel. They walked to a quiet corner near the waterfront, away from crowds. Rivera pulled a folder from his messenger bag. These are communication logs from the week before the Kabul mission. Rivera's voice was low, urgent. 3 separate intelligence analysts flagged the target location as compromised, said enemy forces knew we were coming. Their reports were ignored. Someone higher up wanted that mission to proceed regardless of risk. Rachel opened the folder, her hand steady despite her racing heart. She scanned the documents, official timestamps, classification markings, analysis that clearly warned of an ambush. Why would anyone ignore this? Because the mission was not about tactical success. Rivera's jaw tightened. It was about justifying a larger operation. Command needed an incident to authorize expanded military action in the region. They got their incident. 8 SEALs died, and the expanded operation got approved 2 weeks later. The implications hit Rachel like a physical blow. Those men had not died because of intelligence failure. They had died because someone decided their lives were acceptable losses for political objectives. Who ordered it? Colonel Marcus Steele, Deputy Commander of Special Operations. Rivera pulled out another document. This is his direct communication overriding the intelligence warnings, and this shows he received personal commendations after the expanded operation succeeded. He built his career on those deaths. Rachel stared at the evidence. 3 years of running, 3 years of believing she had failed to make people listen, but she had been right. The truth had been there all along, just buried by people with power and motivation to keep it hidden. What do you need from me? Your testimony. There is a Congressional Oversight Committee investigating special operations accountability. They have agreed to hear evidence about Kabul if we can provide first-hand witness accounts. Rivera met her eyes. You were the medical officer on site. You documented everything. Your testimony combined with these documents could actually make them listen this time. Rachel looked out at Elliott Bay, water stretching toward the horizon, ships moving slowly through gray waves.
She had rebuilt her life here, found peace in the simple act of helping patients, letting go of fights she could not win. But Kyle was right. As long as Steele remained in command, more soldiers would die for operations designed to advance careers rather than serve mission objectives. "I will testify," Rachel said quietly, "but I need protection. Last time I tried to report, my career was destroyed, I received threats, I had to disappear to stay safe. I have allies this time. Senior officers who are tired of corruption, journalists ready to publish if the testimony gets suppressed again. You will not be alone. Rivera's conviction was genuine. And frankly, after what happened to you, there is a lot of support in the SEAL community. People are ready to back you publicly." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then I am in." They exchanged contact information, Rivera promising to coordinate with his congressional contacts. Rachel returned to her apartment, her mind processing what she had just committed to. Her phone rang that evening. Dr. Chen. "Rachel, I did more research after our conversation. I know what happened in Kabul. I know why you left." His voice was different now, respectful. "And I want you to know, if you need time off for testimony or legal proceedings, I will make sure you have it. What you are doing matters." "Thank you." Rachel's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Also," Chen continued, "I told the hospital board about your military background, your real qualifications. They want to offer you a position as trauma education coordinator, teaching combat medicine techniques to our emergency staff, if you are interested." The offer surprised her. Not punishment for hiding her past, but recognition of what that past made possible. "I will think about it." Over the following weeks, Rachel prepared for testimony, met with Rivera's team, reviewed documents that proved what she had known 3 years ago. The congressional hearing was scheduled for early December. Kyle recovered quickly, was discharged with orders to rest before returning to duty. Before he left, he stopped by the hospital to see Rachel. "The teams are talking," he said, "about what you are doing, about Steele finally facing consequences. You've got more backup than you realize." At Mercy General, word spread about Rachel's true identity, but instead of suspicion, she found respect. Nurses asked her to demonstrate techniques. Residents requested to work shifts with her. Even Dr. Chen, whose pride had been wounded in that trauma bay, became an advocate for her work. The hearing arrived. Rachel sat before the Congressional Committee in Washington, cameras recording, reporters watching. She testified for 3 hours, walking through every detail of Kabul, every warning that was ignored, every life that was lost. Rivera presented the documents. Other witnesses corroborated her account. The evidence was overwhelming. Colonel Marcus Steele was relieved of command pending investigation. Criminal charges were filed. The cover-up began to unravel. Rachel returned to Seattle, exhausted but lighter. The weight of 3 years of silence finally lifted. She accepted the position at Mercy General. Teaching trauma medicine became her new purpose, training the next generation, making sure they knew how to save lives under pressure. Dr. Chen apologized formally, admitting his initial dismissal of her skills had come from pride rather than judgment. They developed a mutual respect, working together to build one of the best trauma programs in the region. 6 months later, Rachel stood in the same trauma bay where everything had changed, training a group of residents on tension pneumothorax recognition, demonstrating the needle decompression that had saved Kyle's life. She was no longer hiding, no longer running, no longer just a nurse in anyone's estimation. She was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake, who had also become Rachel Morgan, a woman who understood that titles mattered less than competence, that hierarchy should never prevent someone from doing what was right, that truth had value even when speaking it cost everything. The past had caught up, but instead of destroying her, it had freed her. She taught, she healed. She stood as living proof that one person's courage could challenge systems designed to protect power over people.
And when young medical personnel asked her how she had found the strength to testify, to fight battles that seemed impossible, her answer was always the same. Someone had to, and sometimes that someone is just a nurse, who happens to be exactly who she needs to be. The trauma bay doors opened. Paramedics rushed in with a new patient. Rachel moved forward, her team following, ready for whatever came next, because she was not hiding anymore. She was standing, fighting, teaching, living as the person she had always been meant to be, and that, she had learned, was more than enough. The end.